Tanki Online's history began in the late 2008. A prototype called Tanks was developed. Its main purpose was to demonstrate the capabilities of Alternativa Platform's engine back in the day, the fifth version of Alternativa 3D. The demo's potential was obvious. Developers got obsessed with the idea of creating a full-scale MMO action and began working on what would eventually become Tanki Online. Closed testing of TO started in May 2009. At the same time, Tanki's developers took part in the biggest gaming expo in Russia at the time, Russian Games Developers Conference 2009. They took home 2 awards: Best Game Without a Publisher and Best Technology. Tanki Online was officially launched on the 4th of June, just a month after testing began. This is what it was like. The game was in English only. The Russian version of TO was launched later. The game only had 4 turrets: Smoky, Firebird, Twins and Railgun, and 4 hulls: Wasp, Hunter, Titan and Dictator. Moreover, all of their modifications looked the same. The models of M0 and M3 Wasps were identical. Tanks were equipped with engines which affected their dynamics. Later, for the sake of simplification, engines were joined with hulls. Tanks needed repairs, which were paid for with crystals. This feature was also removed after a while. Paints only affected looks. Protections against turrets were added several months later. The game's balance was very different from what it is now in terms of prices, parameters and availability. For example, M3 Smoky could be purchased for 300 crystals and became available at the rank of Staff Sergeant. At the beginning, the game had about 10 maps, many of which were named after towns in the Perm region, the game's place of birth. Barda, Solikamsk, Assar and Gubaha are still in the game. There were only 2 game modes, DM and TDM. CTF battles were introduced 2 months after the launch. TO included 27 ranks, from Recruit to Marshal. The first player to achieve the top rank was T7000. Railgun was called Fear Machine and was impressive in its size. The turret was just huge. The Wasp and Railgun combo looked comical, almost like an insect, which is where its nickname, the Mosquito, comes from. The game was different from the current Tanki in terms of technologies as well. Hardware acceleration and updated client-server interaction were added much later. But of course, the game was improving step by step. In autumn, Isida joined the existing arsenal of turrets. At its testing stage, the turret looked like a real monster, like the claw of some beast. Thankfully, this model was scrapped and replaced with Isida as we know it now. By the way, the turret was pretty imbalanced back in the day. Dictator and Isida in digital was considered almost impossible to defeat. 2009 also marked the birth of all of Tanki's main movements. This is when the first clans appeared in the community, Kolkhoz and TD42. The first clan championship was held. About the same time, the Parker movement was born. Of course, tricks were much simpler back in the day, rarely getting more complicated than building a tower of tanks. On the 3rd of December, gold hunting was born, with the introduction of the gold box. Its value was 1000 crystals, which is equal to 10,000 in current TO, but just a couple of weeks later it was decreased to 100 crystals, or 1000 in today's currency. The year ended on a major note. In the late 2009, work on the new game, Tanki 2.0, began. However, the project was eventually cancelled. The ideas planned for Tanki 2.0 would instead be implemented in the existing game, step by step. But that is a different story. A story about what awaited TO in the new year of 2010. And you'll be able to hear it in the next episode of the vlog, so don't miss it. 2010 was a period of major achievements and serious growth for Tanki Online. To give you some perspective, the game had less than 100,000 registered users at the beginning of the year, but by the end of it, it had more than 1 million. But let's keep things in the right order. February and March saw the first contests in TO ever, Mr. and Miss Tanki Online. Soon afterwards, a competition for creative tankers was held, where players needed to draw or craft something tanky related or write a story. By the way, the second place in the crafting nomination went to Maxim Husseinov, who obviously wasn't her community manager at the time. One of the biggest achievements for the game was the launch of the Chinese version of Tanki Online in April. The name was changed for the Chinese market from TO to 3D Tank.
Tanki is a strange word in China. People don't know this. Second reason is TankiOnline.com is too long.
Additionally, due to Chinese legislation, servers had to be placed in a separate cluster, which meant players from China never faced tankers from the European version of the game on the battlefield. Without any doubt, the primary milestone of 2010 was the launch of the so-called second tier of equipment. 6 new items, 3 turrets and 3 hulls, extended the arsenal of existing equipment. Thunder, Freeze and Ricochet expanded on the concepts of Smoky, Firebird and Twins, while Hornet, Viking and Mammoth were basically upgraded versions of Wasp, Hunter and Titan. The new items affected the game in a truly major way. Starting from Warrant Officer 1, it was virtually impossible to find any Tier 1 gear in battles. The reason was simple. For example, M0 Hornet was faster, nimbler and better protected than M3 Wasp. It was also cheaper to buy. The only items that weren't affected by the two-grade system were Dictator and Railgun, a standard esports combination back in the day. The reign of Hornet in this field began later. And probably the main peculiarity in the game's economy at the time. At the rank of second lieutenant, a tanker had access to all turrets, hulls and paints in the game. Beyond that point, going further up the rank ladder was a lot less motivating than it is now. By the way, the looks for Hornet and Ricochet were totally different at the testing stage. Hornet had 2 sets of tracks on each side, while Ricochet had several barrels and looked a lot like today's Vulcan. In June, Tanki celebrated its first birthday. About a month later, on the 7th of July, the first issue of the Russian TO newspaper was launched, made completely by the community's enthusiasts. After that, dozens of issues followed, providing tankers with a constant flow of guides, reviews, contests, and fictional stories. The second Sunday of September, Tankers Day, saw the first ever discount in TO's history, which provoked unexpectedly negative reactions. Of course, the community soon realized how beneficial these sales were and started looking forward to them on every holiday ever since. In November, TO took part in the Runet Prize. The game had to compete with the biggest players on Russia's gaming market, but managed to get into top 10 in the people's voting. The last milestone for 2010 was the New Year holiday. Themed decorations, unique map, discounts. This is when all the traditional attributes of any Tanki event were born. In the meantime, Alternativa Platform's masterminds were still working on the ambitious Tanki 2.0. while TO's community began hearing rumors about a new turret called Shaft. But more on that in the next episode of the vlog. 2011 in TO turned out to be a year of experimentation, extensive community activities, and huge growth for the game's audience. In just 12 months, the number of registrations increased almost by 7 times. Today's video will be about the events that helped achieve such an impressive result. Let's begin. In February, the first ever battle between developers and players was organized. It was called 300 Tankers. There were so many people willing to take part that it was decided to increase the number of players to 3,000. The decisive battle was held on the 15th of December and won by the TO developers team. Around the same time, the first ever Valentine's Day event was held. As an experiment, a unique turret was made available for purchase. This was the first item of what is now a very familiar denomination, Smoky XT. Unlike today's unique items, the parameters were superior to the ones of its standard counterpart. The turret was feared by everyone, but only for 1.5 weeks. Smoky XT was removed from the game on the 24th of February. The 1st of April was memorable for 2 things. For 1 day only, the legendary Blue Sphere was available for purchase. Nobody knew exactly what it did, and only few could find out due to the price of the item, which was impressive: 100,500 crystals, which is equivalent to more than 1 million in today's Tanki. Contrary to what many believed, the sphere did absolutely nothing, and the crystals for its purchase were soon returned to all the buyers. Besides that, the Blue Sphere's garage description became the starting point for the first ever quest in Tanki, a series of puzzles which needed to be solved as soon as possible. Tankers loved the unusual experience, and such quests have since become a traditional element for major holidays in TO. In May, the first test of Tanki 2.0 was launched, which allowed the developers to detect several serious technical issues inside the game's code. The testing was quickly terminated, and the game went under the radar once again for some serious reworking. On TO's second birthday, another battle between developers and players was held: 1,000 Tankers. This time there was no winner. The battle ended with a tie. The biggest event of 2011 was the introduction of Shaft. The new turret became a bestseller straight away, ending up in the garages of many tankers. Shaft also became the champion in terms of how many times it was rebalanced. Its damage and firing rate were changed, and arcade shot was added. Its looks were changed as well, with the turret's barrel being shortened over time. The esports community in TO became divided into 2 sides. Conservative tankers stuck to good old dictators and railguns, while members of Tanki Online fighting, or simply TOF, played with second-tier equipment. In autumn, the League of Clans tournament started, becoming the biggest TO esports activity at that point. In November, Tanki Online took part in the Runet Prize for the second time, placing 9th, which was a sign of stability and success. TO stepped into the year of 2012 with the traditional New Year celebrations. The number of registrations was getting close to 7 million, and the most radical changes in TO awaited ahead. More on that in the next episode. 2012 in Tanki Online turned out to be full of major changes and events, and is still remembered by many of the game's veterans. Today we'll recall all of its major milestones. Let's start. The year did not start on a positive note. There was a real epidemic of cheating, and it was growing bigger every day. Thankfully, developers responded with an updated anti-cheat software that blocked tens of thousands of cheaters within the first few days of going live. The issue was solved, and to celebrate the event, a portion of the crystals confiscated from the cheaters was redistributed to honest players. In March, the developers announced the cancellation of Tanki 2.0, with many of the ideas and solutions for the project being implemented in Tanki Online. The first example of this was the introduction of hardware acceleration. Now, besides using the computer's processor, TO could also use graphic cards, which increased the average FPS by at least 2 times. 2012 was packed with various events. April's full with the mysterious green triangle, thematic battles between tankers and developers, Tanki Ada, and many more, including Kasim vs Sun, the battle between two of the most well-known Tanki employees, where players could support one of the sides by purchasing a special fan paint. Summer saw the birth of the Tanki Online video blog, created to keep tankers up to date on development news, tournaments and other important events for the communities. Hardware acceleration support wasn't the only major update of the year. In June, tankers started getting 10 points for every tank they destroyed. Before that, experience for each kill was calculated based on a complicated formula, taking into account a tanker's rating. A general would only get 1 point for destroying a second lieutenant, so the update made it a lot easier to reach the top rank. Autumn brought an extremely juicy update, introducing control points mode and updated graphics with completely reworked textures. In just 1 month, developers introduced the support for dynamic shadows, which made the game look a lot more alive. And of course, the 17th of December, the famous rebalance that split the history of Tanki into 2 parts, before and after. This was the biggest TO update ever, changing parameters, rank limits and the prices of all turrets, hulls and paints. First and second tiers were scrapped, and from that point onwards, all turrets and hulls became equally competitive. The changes were truly radical, so developers decided to remove all turrets, hulls and paints from players' garages and refund all the crystals spent on them. Additionally, 3 new ranks were introduced: Field Marshal, Commander and Generalissimo. At that point in time, most marshals already had more than 1,400,000 experience points, so there's no real answer to the question of who was the first Generalissimo. Several thousands of tankers achieved the new top rank with the update. 2012 ended with the traditional New Year celebrations and the first full-scale quest, the game, which is now one of the central elements for New Year celebrations in Tanki Online. The year 2013 in TO is remembered mainly for the sheer number of major in-game and technical updates, micro upgrades, new physics, crystals for new ranks, and many more. But let's keep it ordered. In January, Tanki was moved to a new server platform, which optimized the server load and as a result decreased the amount of lag. It also made launching new updates easier. February brought the legendary update 1.23. Everything related to crystals was multiplied by 10. The amount of crystals in boxes, the prices in the garage, the size of daily gifts. Everything except funds, which were increased by 5 times. The change stirred quite a controversy, so funds were further increased in April and once again in 2014, which ultimately took them above the original value. Spring of 2013 brought lots of in-game changes. Battle mode filters, dust from tracks, deep shadows, the first product kits. It's almost impossible to imagine today's Tanki Online without any of these features. For many tankers, one of the brightest memories from 2013 is Moon Silence, the map that was introduced to celebrate Cosmonautics Day. Thanks to its low gravity, it became a real hit among TO's players. It was initially intended to remain in the game, but sadly that was impossible. Low gravity prevented the anti-cheat software from effectively detecting the use of third-party software, so in autumn a special event was held to give a final farewell to the map. For entire week, special gold boxes were dropped on the map, and tankers could buy a special commemorative paint, Moonwalker. The main event for the summer was definitely the friend system. The update gave tankers an easy way to always stay in touch and invite each other to battles, no matter which server they were on. Autumn marked the first ever offline tournament for TO. The event was held in Perm, Russia, the home city of Tanki. More than 500 people gathered to meet the developers, take part in giveaways, and fight for the title of strongest tanker in the city. The 21st of November marked another milestone. TO won the Runet Prize as the best game. Celebrations were huge, discounts on turrets, gifts for all tankers, and double battle funds for entire weekend. On the 11th of December, the game was given a new physics engine, which increased the overall dynamics and gave each hull its own character. But the real cherry on this 2013 update cake was micro upgrades, the most highly anticipated update of the year. By the way, the system was meant to work differently. There was a chance that an update would fail and not be installed. Thankfully, that particular feature of MUs was scrapped. Micro upgrades were accompanied by 2 other features: a rank up effect, which created a whole genre of Tanki videos, and crystal bonuses given for ranking up. Of course, with the update, players received crystals for all the ranks they had already achieved. For example, Generalissimos received a whopping 314,000 crystals. The year ended as it should have, with a New Year event that went on for 2 full weeks. Tankers enjoyed special gold boxes and discounts and stepped into the year of 2014, which was equally interesting in TO, but more on that later. 2014 in Tanki Online wasn't just a year of in-game changes, it was a year of intense work with the players, both existing and new. The year started with an update that affected basically every tanker. In the end of January, most maps were reworked. In addition to that, the update marked the return of the Madness map. The next major change wasn't technically a feature. Tanki Online moved into a new data center located in Europe. Thanks to a wider channel, this improved the lag situation for many tankers. In March, tankers received the ability to change their equipped turrets, hulls and paints without leaving a battle. At first, changing items of a certain category was only possible once every 15 minutes, but then this cooldown was decreased to 1 minute. On the 10th of April, the Brazilian version of Tanki was launched. To celebrate this, the Rio map was introduced, alongside with a very special contest. The first team to reach the top of the Rio skyscraper would be rewarded with 1 million crystals. In less than a day, the peak was conquered by tankers from the German Tanki Tutorials team. Summer turned out to be extremely intense. TO celebrated its 5th birthday. Isida and Repair Kit were given the ability to remove burning and freezing effects. CP mode was reworked, while game designers improved the way the funds are split between tankers in battles. 2014 is also remembered for many offline events. In spring, Tanki took part in Ojik and held a tournament in Yekaterinburg. Then in summer we visited Gamescom in Cologne, and in autumn BGS in São Paulo. The last big offline thing for the year was the event in Novosibirsk, which also included the Star Series finals. Tankers battled for a prize pool of 29,000 USD. The event attracted a lot of visitors. The 28th of September marked the release of smart cooldowns, which made the use of supplies much more tactical and added the much-needed balance to TO's gameplay. The second major update in autumn was the change in crystal boxes. On the 18th of November, boxes were given different values, from 1 to 100 crystals, instead of the usual standard 10 crystals. The intent of the developers was to deal with the issue of farming. In the end, to reach this goal, crystal boxes were removed completely, and all the crystals from them were moved to the battle fund, which was given a 50% increase in growth speed. These changes were received well by the majority of tankers. October saw the launch of a series of books based on Tanki Online, sadly only in Russian. While in November, TO received the Runet Prize for the second year in a row for being the best game of the Russian internet. At the end of the year, in December, developers weren't even thinking of relaxing before the holidays. Several maps were given night mode versions, format battles were released, and of course the Hammer turret was introduced. 2014 ended with New Year celebrations, where in addition to discounts and special gold boxes, tankers were given the chance to rent a unique tank, Hornet and Railgun XT. All in all, the year was rich in juicy updates and memorable community events. The year 2015 in Tanki Online will be remembered for a number of improvements on various features of the game, some of which were completely rethought. Of course, there were brand new additions as well. Today we'll recall the brightest of those moments. Let's start. The entire first half of the year was about changes in the game's balance. In January, the impact force of Smoky and Railgun was decreased, while in March, medium and heavy hulls were given extra protection. April saw a full-scale update that changed the parameters of practically all the turrets and hulls. The last set of changes was introduced in June, which is when turrets and hulls were given their final setups. On the 7th of February, the long-awaited Vulcan was introduced, as well as 13 new paints. The turret was given its well-deserved place in TO's arsenal of weapons, becoming the gun of choice for many tankers. 2015 also saw two serious reworkings of the micro-upgrade system. In May, players were given the ability to upgrade the parameters of their items to the level of their next modification, as well as enter battles with items that were undergoing upgrades. A few months later, close to the end of the year, all upgradable parameters were joined into one, making the system simpler and more intuitive. The main event in June was the Tanki Roadshow. Community managers Maxim and Nikolai visited 5 Russian cities, meeting local tankers, giving out presents, answering questions and of course taking lots of photos. In July, developers introduced daily missions, which replaced daily gifts. From that point onwards, getting a daily bunch of crystals or supplies required playing, but the rewards became several times bigger. In September, the arsenal of XT items was grown to include unique versions of Viking, Wasp, Firebird and Thunder. And about a month later, premium accounts were introduced, giving tankers a boost to experience and crystals earned. The most intense period of the year was autumn. On the 17th of September, tankers were given the ability to buy the highest modifications of turrets and hulls available at their rank directly, saving themselves lots of crystals. In addition to that, wholesaling discounts were introduced. The more items of a category you own, the cheaper the remaining ones will be. Just 3 weeks later, personal discounts were launched, giving players random discounts on individual items. But probably the greatest highlight for tankers was October, as this is when personal statistics, achievements and ratings were launched. All this was followed by the launch of the Polish Tanki Online, the organization of garage items into categories, and of course the New Year event, with the unique map and temporary battle mode called Assault. The year turned out to be really intense, and 2016 will be at least as good.